It is. I mean, our fans are awesome. Like, if I would say one out of maybe 1,000 or 2,000, you get like oh boy, hey, you know what I mean? But our crowds are really pretty good. I mean, and usually it's just someone who's just too drunk and probably should have been in bed a little while ago. But it's our interactions they are overwhelmingly positive. But they don't miss a trick out there. If there's something written, whatever, and unfortunately they believe a lot of it too, because you can write anything. I mean, I've seen comments that are, whether they were jokes or intended jokes, become gospel at a certain point. It's like, man, there was nothing true about that. People are just crazy.
Yeah, we'll roll right into the podcast from that thought. And for me, like, it's interesting, like, talk about cancer culture a little bit as we get into it, because at Barstool, it's like, that's the hot topic, right? Is like, we aren't going to let cancel culture destroy us. And from my perspective, there's a lot of things that need to get canceled. There's some things that should not be canceled. What are your thoughts on it being a podcast host of a podcast? I mean, it's not really controversial, but the brand of Barstool kind of just calls it how they see it, and it is what it is, and this is what we're going to do.
Yeah, I mean, when you speak your mind, you're always going to be towing that. I should say, always towing that line. But you're sometimes going to step to that line, and you got to be careful with what you say. It's funny. I've said on our show, we've talked about so-called cancel culture on our show, and a few years back, before it's even been the raging storm it is now. And I said, and I still believe that I don't think it's an actual thing. I think people calling for it isn't, and if it doesn't happen, then that's not really cancel culture. People tweeting about it and bitching about something, oh, this guy should be fired. Okay, that's just always going to be there because it's part of the internet. It's more people complaining. But I mean, when you think about how many people have actually been quote unquote canceled, I mean, Harvey Weinstein, who deserved that he went to jail for rape. Like you look at a guy, someone like what's his name, the comedian Louis C.K. Like, I mean, he's touring again. So did he get canceled? I mean, he got the New York Times story, and he looked awful and all that stuff. But he's touring again. He's out doing what he did. I don't think you can say he really got canceled. I think, like I said to Whit that time, it's just repercussions where people didn't go through repercussions maybe 20, 30 years ago. But the internet has given a voice to people who previously may not have had a voice, and or even just the company might know things that people say something stupid online, and there's just things to answer for that you didn't have to answer for 30 years ago. Like, I think sometimes it can go over the line. People like every little thing that they want, guy wrote an article in the Washington Post saying basically he didn't like Indian food, and everyone's calling him a racist online and fire the guy. It's like, wait a minute, the guy just doesn't like a particular food. Like, was his article clumsy, whatever? Yeah, but I don't think the guy's track record indicates he's racist in any way. So it can totally swing the other way too. Like, just people just being too sensitive and crying too much, because I think you can always joke. People say you can't say anything more. I think that's false. I think you can still say whatever you want. There's just different repercussions now. They may be none. And, it could be a punch in the face. Like, if you say the wrong word in front of the wrong person, and that could be warranted sometimes if you say that. I'm not advocating violence, but sometimes if you say something that's stupid, you might deserve to be punched. Other times it's a dirty look. Other times it's people agreeing with you. So I think you can still say what you want. I just think the reactions you might elicit from said statement are different than they were before, because people again have a voice where they didn't before.
It's interesting, yeah, that's probably not the way I plan to start the podcast off, but that's the beauty of podcasting. You can kind of do what you want, and for me,
exactly.
I just, it's an interesting topic that you guys always talk about, and obviously, like, Biz tells the stories on the podcast about when he was with he works for the Coyotes, so it's like it's a different thing. He's got he represents them. He also represents Barstool, and then Whit and you let it fly probably a little bit more than Biz does, even though I don't know, some of Biz's stories are really letting it fly. But he's like, it seems now Biz on the podcast, because he's got the significant girlfriend. The stories aren't what they used to be.
Yeah, I agree, and that's a good thing. I think it's maybe maturity. Not that Paul is immature, but we've all been young guys, and I mean, I'm still a young guy who run around and have fun and do what you do when you're single. And it's just you can't tell those stories anymore, and it's just disrespectful, really, to have a girlfriend or a significant other to tell those. And even I think also Paul probably didn't want to rely on that completely as his brand. I know that was his early shtick, so to speak, with the first version of Biz Nasty online, and even speaking times have even changed in those few years. Like, you can say those things again, and you can let it fly, or you can say them and you might get some repercussions because of even in the last few years, like that things have changed in the line. It's just to go back to the point as far as Barstool, that's the the beauty of this company is, the creative freedom, creative liberty we have. The only the golden rule, and this is nowhere else. I mean, it's everywhere else. You don't fuck with advertisers. You don't talk shit about advertisers. Otherwise, you don't get memos about stuff. I mean, you can write about whoever, whatever, say whatever you want. Obviously, don't be intentionally offensive. But as far as what we say and do, we don't get canceled like Dave. I mean, if Dave Portnoy was going to be canceled, it would have happened already. I mean, he is uncancelable if you think cancel culture is a thing. Dave just spits in the face of it. He just remains true to himself. And I think that spirit kind of reverberates all through Barstool. It's like, unless you're a real shithead or say or do something really stupid, they're going to have your back or just let you do what you're doing. I mean, we never get spoken to about what we talk about, and nor does anybody else, to my knowledge.
I think the interesting part about Barstool and why they're so successful is the connectability, right? It's no secret. Like, you guys connect to so many different people, from podcasts to whatever, and now the brand is it's just absolutely ridiculous. 7.4 million unique listeners. This is in 2012. Excuse me. This is an article in March of 2021 that comes out, and it says, you have more unique listeners than ESPN, right? That shows a broad variety. I mean, I'm dialed in on Barstool on a few different things, but primarily you guys, that's really what is like my escape from football is hockey, and it's true. And I think it's unbelievable you guys do, but it's the connectability, it's the relatability, it's the personalities. There's nothing like it in the world. What is your favorite part about that connectability? Like, or what's the most unique thing, I guess you could say? Like, did you plan on it being that much of a connection with the fans, or you're just like, hey, we have a podcast, and now all of a sudden you're like all over the place doing, Hockey Fest, and you're going to Winter Classics, and, you're doing signings, and you're doing all these things, and they're sold out. Like, the connectability with Barstool offers is unbelievable.
I mean, it's easy for me because I am one. Like, I mean, I started off as a Barstool back before it was the cesspool it is now. I was a Barstool commenter back when it was the early Boston only days, when the blog first started. And basically it was a joke proxy for my friends, who, like, only 20 guys at the time knew me as Rear Admiral. Was a college nickname. So, like, my Boston buddies who read the site, they knew it was me making those jokes. So that's how it started. So, I mean, I went from a commenter to a blogger to Chiclets to where I am now. And so I'm always equal to the folks who come in and listen. And, I would never say no or big time anybody. It's just like, it's just automatic for me I'm a personable guy anyways, generally speaking, but it's just automatic for me to talk to anybody who wants to talk or say hello. And, when we do these events, like you mentioned, Hockey Fest, like, we're not hiding off in some VIP tent. Like, we're hanging out. I mean, with biz 8 hours a day. Anybody wants to come over, say hello, shoot the shit, talk, whatever, take a picture. Like, I think we'll always have that approachability. I think that's kind of what separates, Barstool from a lot of other places. Because I followed Dave, funny enough, back in May. I followed him from, I think it was the West Village up to Barstool headquarters. It was a pretty half-hour walk or whatever. And the amount of people in his wake who just were like kind of fawning, and, the cameras coming out, and, and I said, Dave, I'm surprised, like, no disrespect to him, just it was nonstop. And he said, well, he stopped for everyone, talked to everybody. And he said, I think that's the difference. Like, New York usually is known for not going up to celebrities. They're like, oh, we don't give a shit. But they gave a shit with Dave. And he says, well, the people know they can come up to us and say hello, and we're not going to cold shoulder them. They're not afraid to come up and say hello. And, I think that's something that, like I said, differentiates a little bit, that we're just approachable Joes and Jills.
Yeah. And Jill, yeah, well said. It is such a unique company, and it's, everybody has their favorite part of it, right? Everyone can tell their story about what they like the best. Everyone talks about us, this, that, what podcast, what blog or whatever. And you guys are taking off, and we're going to get into that. But I want to get back into you. You talk about college. Let's go back to young Brian growing up in Boston, where you're from, and your kind of story of how you got to, into college and where you're at now.
Let's see. I grew up, as we talk about on the show frequently, the Charlestown, Mass, the movie, The Town, if you're familiar with it, the bank robbery capital of the world, basically. That's the neighborhood I'm from. I grew up in. Very unique place to grow up. It's funny, like the whole hockey player flunked out type plot line. That's pretty apropos, because there were so many guys who were talented with skill to go pro, no doubt about it. And, got waylaid or sidelined by, activities and substances and all that. And the 70s in Boston was a crazy, crazy time to grow up. Guys, older than me at the time, it was just that you kind of had like a racial civil war going on, and people couldn't go to school, and it was crazy. So there was so much wasted potential and talent from that era that just never got to where they could have. And speaking of the college, like I actually went to Northeastern first, place in Boston, pretty well-known school, but I grew up watching Animal House and Revenge of the Nerds. And I was, not that I wanted to be in a fraternity, but, you grew up watching all these college movies, and I was taking the T to Huntington Ave and sitting with the commuters. And like, I went to one party in like the first 6 months. Like, this isn't college to me. Like, it's a great school, but I wasn't having fun. I wasn't having the college experience I anticipated. So I quit Northeastern. I was a pre-law major. I was in the College of Criminal Justice. Like, I was like, I thought I was going to be Arnie Becker from LA Law back when I was 18 years old. And then I kind of got disillusioned with the whole idea of just being a lawyer. And then I quit school for about a year and a half. And then I had kind of a crossroads. It was like, all right, you get to late teens, early 20s in Charleston. You got to kind of do something with your life. You got to figure out unless you're just going to be fuck around for the rest of your life, which some guys do choose that route. And I was either going to go to college or the military. And I had gone to an Air Force recruiter. Me and one of my buddies were going to go in together. He did end up going, but I went in and I signed it. I took the first initial test to, basically weed out the real dumbos. And then the next time I went in, I was going to sign my life away to Uncle Sam for 4. And then unless I got a good college financial aid package, well, lo and behold, North Adams State, which was like number 7 on the Playboy top 10 party schools back in the day. It was like, this was before binge drinking was even a phrase, before people even said that. It was still very much a party era in college campuses. Well, I ended up getting in there, and that financial aid package was good. I basically was going to be able to go to school. So I didn't go to the military, and the reason I was going to do that was because to get on the Boston Fire Department, my father was a fireman for 30 years here. And that's, every little kid wants to do what his dad did. But because of the way they did the hiring, you had to basically, as a white, it's not a complaining thing, but as a white male, if you didn't have veteran status, you basically weren't going to get hired. So when you got the veteran status, that allowed you to get higher in the civil service thing. So a lot of guys go into the service primarily to get veteran status, and so they can get any number of jobs when they get out. And that's what I was going to do, was go in the service, get your veteran status and become a firefighter. But when I did go to college, I I used to bum me out for a long time every time I saw a fire truck, because that's I used to ride them as a kid with my dad and going on runs, and you feel that adrenaline rush. But then I went to college. I was undeclared. I became an English major, started running the school paper my sophomore year, just had no plans on it. It just things just sort of fell into place. And that put me on like the media track, which obviously now years later, I realized I should have been. I probably would have been a shitty firefighter. So I don't get like wistful every time a fire truck drives by anymore like I used to. I feel like I'm doing what I was supposed to do, but it was no like map. There was no road plan. I mean, I was, like I said, I was running the school newspaper in the mid 90s, and every advice is like, oh, this is what you should do. This is what you should do. Well, unbeknownst to us, the internet was pretty new in its infancy somewhat. It was basically like an undiagnosed malignant tumor for the print journalism industry that nobody found yet. And, when you get out of college, it was like all of a sudden, the Globe, they stopped hiring, the Herald stopped hiring, just people getting laid off, newspapers getting bought and sold. And the industry was basically a shit industry to try to get into. So that's when Dave was looking for a blogger one day. And, he had a Bruins blog, and this kid, he called Glenn Murray a playmaker back for the Bruins. Like, Glenn Murray's a 40-goal scorer. He was not a playmaker. So the commenters revolted against him. And Dave's like, hey, I got to get someone else. And he literally, this is so long ago at Barstool, he would post a blog. We need a new Bruins blogger, send in submissions. That would be the blog. And then I emailed the submission and never heard back. And then the next day it was like, my words were on Barstool Sports main blog, which that's as good. That's a byline in modern times. It was like the same thing.
That's what it's called, a retweet now.
Yeah, basically, yeah. So I seen your name, what even if it's your pen name in print, so to speak, online was great the first time. So that was kind of like, all right, I kept my foot in the door with the blogging. Like Dave, I eventually got a press pass from the Bruins, and Dave, let me keep doing it, but it wasn't a career yet. It wasn't. Dave said, I'm not hiring a Bruins guy, and to his credit, he still hasn't. And I was just trying to get a job on the writing side, and then a little over 5 years ago, actually close to 6 years ago, Witt sent out that tweet saying, hey, I want to start a podcast. And he tagged Biz in it. And Biz is like, hey, I'm still playing for a couple more years. Check back. And I replied, half joking, sort of like, hey, you look at a partner, how serious, Witt? And we knew each other a little bit. We had hung out a few times. We weren't like buddy, and then he slid into my DMs and asked, "Are you serious?" I said, 100%. And he said, "All right, let's do it." And so that was right before Christmas, and by the Super Bowl, we had our first episode out. I got a mixer. I learned how to, do the garage band, whatever record, and I would actually send it to an intern we had who would then do whatever he did and then get it uploaded to Spotify. And Dave knew we were starting it, but you had to kind of prove your worth a little bit first. And we were doing it on my couch, like Wayne and Goff, like just having fun. I think we had some early momentum, and Dave listened. He says, "Hey, I like the show. We want to add you guys to the roster." And then a little bit after that, the ad money starts coming in, and then we're doing fine. It's actually, at the time, I'm a school custodian, so it's a nice little supplement to my income, because you need to work for insurance. So I had to keep that gig for a while, and then we brought Biz on, and Biz was like a shot of steroids to the show. Like, he just had this sort of vision me and Whit either didn't have, in the business sense maybe we didn't have. And he's like, "Guys, this could be so much more. We're filling a vacuum here." And there really was a vacuum for this type of show. We didn't know it when we started it. So then it got to the point I was able to quit my job and not have to push the broom anymore and just do it full time. And it's been a ride. So ironically, I was trying to get paid as a writer for all those years, and it took my big fat mouth to finally get me paid.
I love it. It's such an unbelievable story. And this is the challenging part for me as an interviewer, that I'm such a big fan of you guys. And we were talking about off air, I know so much about you guys because you talk about your lives all the time. You're so authentic. You talk about college, you talk about the trials and tribulations, you talk about all the funny stuff that turned into some good stuff and the funny stuff that wasn't so good. Mm-hmm. So I had to sift through my thoughts and okay, what type of questions? And, now you guys are the number one podcast, hockey podcast in the world. That's insane.
Yeah, it is.
As a fire truck goes by, that's insane. In the best way possible. And I, with so much respect behind it, credit to you guys. Congrats. That's the bottom line, peer to peer. I'm not even on your level, but it's just unbelievable. And you're right. It's it's a testament to all the people over the years that have invested in you guys in the Barstool side. I can only imagine the backing, and Dave and Erica, and now you got, Grinnell and your team. And that's what I want to get into. Before I get into that, though, I want to get back to your job, right? Now you're a full-time podcaster, but you said you were pushing the broom, you were grinding, you were trying to find a way to make ends meet. What was your schedule like?
That's basically what it came to a head, because I was just doing the job. Now, what's good about the custodian gig was you had 8.5 hours to do about 2 hours of work every night if you were in a good spot, so you can just get it done in one fell swoop and do whatever else you wanted. Go home, sleep, go to lunch, do whatever. So I would just, make time. Okay, we got an interview at 4:00. I would sometimes do it in a closet, legit in a closet where someone couldn't find me, because some teachers were cool, but you don't want people snitching to administrators, whatever. Guys, "Oh, what's this guy doing when he's working here?" And so I had to be really careful about people snitching or whatever. But I would legit be, doing an interview and have to have my finger on the mute button in case announcements came over the loudspeaker during classes or whatever, just so it wouldn't get picked up. But I would say I was doing it for, let's see, 60. I think probably about 2 years before they started colliding. Because that's what I was doing. I was taking my vacation and personal time to do road trips for Chiclets, which I was gladly doing. But eventually it was okay, you're gonna run out of time and you're gonna have to bang in sick. And then like I said, eventually the success of the show was able to make the decision for me, because I was able to just basically go to work for Barstool at that point, because it was able to make a living. Plus, of course, the benefits are huge. Just having insurance in this country, it's it's great. It's crazy the system we have, but if you're not working, you don't have it. And the older you get, the more you need it. So being able to switch over and not have to worry about stuff like that was huge. But I would say probably about 2 years in before they truly clashed, where I was okay, I can't do both anymore.
So from the school closet to some of the biggest forums in the world talking hockey, and like I said, number one hockey podcast in the world. Talk about your team. An interesting group.
Mm-hmm.
There's Whit, a former NHLer, Penguins, played all over the league, had a really nice career, was a high draft pick, a promising player out of Boston University and your area there. And then you have Biz, who's just a media stud, and a former NHL player, right? I mean, he gets ripped all the time and he makes fun of himself and everyone's self-deprecating, but Biz was a good hockey player. It really was. And then you got Grinnell, who adds in from time to time, but really does the grunt work for you guys. And that's really how you guys make it. And then yourself. So talk about all the personalities and then how they all fit together.
Yeah, I mean, I always say this, chemistry is just a funny thing. You can't just, well, like I said, maybe a chemist can make it in a lab, but chemistry among people, it's unpredictable. And, like even like me and Whit, when we first started, like, I'm a kid who's from the inner city. He's a kid from who's like, little bit of a nicer suburb. And, you can tell by listening to the show, we have different tastes when it comes to certain things in life and different opinions. So I think we're opposite in a lot of ways, to be blunt. But I think that we knew that going in, so we wouldn't like it too personal. Wouldn't like get mad over someone's opinion. Like I think me and Witch just had instant chemistry from the jump. And then bringing a guy like Biz, who, like, it's funny, we weren't looking to add anybody. Like, we weren't looking to become a 3-man booth or anything like that. But the second and third time we had Biz on, like, the numbers are through the roof. He's absolutely hilarious. I mean, I don't have to explain Biz to you, but for the audience who might not know, he's just a funny guy, very candid, very, he can be dirty, but in a funny way. Just a character. And we were talking to him like, hey, should we see if Biz wants to join? Like, it wasn't like, should we see a Biz or this one or that one? It was just Biz. That was it. If he said no, we weren't going to look elsewhere. And we were like, yeah, I think it'll be good for the show. And we asked him, and he was ecstatic. He was, he was looking for something else to do, get his hand in. Biz likes to have a lot of things going on. And he joined right away. And that added, actually, that, that's what chemistry is, a funny thing. It wasn't great at first. And if you people who go back and listen to the episodes from the beginning, which is like, people tell me they'll do a road trip across the country and listen to the whole, and I'm like, I want to pin a medal on that chest to just listen to our voices for that long, especially mine. It's like, I don't know how you do that. So yeah, bringing Biz on, it was huge. He just had this, basically vision of what more we could do. But early on there were bumps in the road. Like we didn't sit down and say, oh, how are we going to do this now? We just kind of kept trying to wing it. And you could probably hear that, the taunts were a little more abrasive maybe in those episodes. That, it was a learning curve for me, and, getting my balls broken, and just with those guys, it was just kind of, we would hash it out. And that's the other thing too, is we're all grown men. We could, if we have an issue or something with the show, like, hey, A, B, C, and D, we'll hash it out and we move along. Like there's been, this hasn't been beef free in 5 years, but there's very few beefs. But when they come up, we just say, all right, here's what you got to say, here's what I got to say, and it's squashed them, and we move along. So I think after those early bumps, that things started getting better, and we just kind of hit a cruising altitude, and I think we're just kind of going slightly higher every year since. As for Grinelli, very similar story to mine. It was all about timing, and he sent an email to me, and I would get them frequently, like, oh, I love the show, but your audio sucks. Like, I can help it, blah, blah, blah. But the kid would be in New York or Illinois or whatever. It's like, buddy, we need someone on site that would help. And Grinelli sent an email of similar type and said, hey, I live in Burlington, Mass. I don't care about pay. I can do whatever. And I saved it. I'm like, who knows what will happen? No shit, calling the next day. A mixer shits the bed, completely dies out. Me and Whit still go for another half hour because we don't have a producer on hand to tell us, hey, the mixer shit the bed. So we didn't notice that it was squandered. And I say, you know what? This kid emailed me last night. He's local. He can actually get on site. And that was Grinelli, like the next day after his email. So it was fresh in my head. I had saved it anyways. And he come in and he basically, cleaned up the audio, figured out a few other tricks, a lot of tricks, because I didn't know what I was doing, to be honest with you. I guess I was co-producing the first episodes. And he came in and, he just, from a technical level, brought us to where we needed to be. And he's always been great at that. He, obviously chips in with some content here and there. He's been great with the Hockey Fest stuff. And Mike does a lot of work behind the scenes that, doesn't get shown. And, he makes us look and sound good a lot of the time. But Mike busts his balls, and he's great at what he does. He's come a long way from when he started.
Yeah, it's a tremendous team there. And talk about the involvement from the people, at headquarters, because we talked about that a little bit before. You say they let you do your thing, but there's a lot of support there, right? Like that's just what it's all about. The support to do what you guys want, and the flexibility to be creative. And you guys are doing a lot, from the sandbaggers to, like I said, Hockey Fest. You're going to Winter Classics. You're going to the All-Star game. You're ready. You're going to travel to the finals if it wasn't in Canada, I believe, if I remember correctly. Right. Yep. So that's a lot of support. Talk about their support.
Yeah. I mean, basically anything we want to do or where we want to go, the sponsors usually don't have a problem lining them up. And we just basically pick, we're going to probably do it next week. We look at the schedule and pick out which cities we want to go to, which games we want to go to, which events. Now, All-Star game is usually a gimme anyways, especially this year it's in Vegas. So we were dying to go. We were practically, we had, not to jinx the Vegas, but we had everything but flights booked. We were waiting for them to beat Montreal. We were going to go for the final, but obviously that didn't happen. So we're chomping at the bit, however you say it, to get to Vegas. So we're definitely going to go to the All-Star game. And then there's 2 outdoor games this year, the Minnesota Winter Classic, which we're not sure on yet. We've been dying to get to Minnesota, but the Arizona Barstool Bowl is the night before in Arizona. And I know that's going to be an all hands on deck situation. So, I mean, even we could get up and fly to Minnesota the next day, but logistically with equipment and crew, it's like, I don't know if we're going to be able to do the Winter Classic this year, but if we can't, that means we'll go to Nashville instead for the other outdoor game. I think I think they're playing Columbus. I'm not sure. Actually, don't quote me on that. So, we basically map out where we're going to go, and it's like, okay, it's everything pretty much. It hasn't been a place I don't think we've wanted to go where it hasn't been supported. And, we're kind of even like self running. I mean, I support the show, but obviously the people who help at ad sales, we have, tons of people supporting us in that. And, I guess below the line, as they say in Hollywood, people who do the graphic arts and all the edited and all that type of stuff. That like we do, we don't get where we are without them folks. That people who don't know their names, because they're essential to what we do. But as far as the support, yeah, I mean, it's kind of like almost the machine hum along. It's like if you don't hear from anybody, it's a good thing. You know what I mean? It just means unless it's like, hey, good job, keep it going. But sometimes it's good to not get an email from the boss.
Let's talk about Pink Whitney. I mean, this thing is absolutely bigger than people can imagine. Same with your podcast, right? Like I explain what you guys do and why I'm such a fan of it all the time. And yeah, okay. And then read your article, a couple of articles out, the one on the hustle in particular that just sheds a light on all you guys and talks about Pink Whitney, fastest growing flavored vodka in the country, 15+ million bottles sold. That was before the summer. So Lord knows what that is now. I'm sure may know the number, over 100 million in grossing numbers, just ridiculous. And then this is one thing I saw that Erica saw on that. Erica said, who's the CEO of Barstool, 40% of Pink Whitney drinkers aren't even vodka drinkers, which is really cool. And it just shows the brand, shows you guys. I mean, I went right to the store and bought it right away. And I'm not even a big vodka fan. It kind of sits on the shelf and it's kind of half full. And I'll do a little tasting every once in a while, but it's just not my flavor. But regardless, talk about Pink Whitney, talk about what it's become and how it started.
Yeah, absolutely bananas story. It started with an organic ad read. We were psyched to find out New Amsterdam was going to be our presented sponsor. I just must have been 2 years ago, because they were the same company that was in business with the NHL. So funny enough, I got the hat on because it was like, oh well, we're in the same bed with this company whose names on the boards. That's great. And our very first ad read was talk about how you like your vodka. And, I gave a cheesy, like Don Draper answer, like on the rocks with a twist or whatever. Like you, I'm vodka's, I'm more of a beer and wine guy than a spirits guy. So absolutely. I wasn't going to make up something too elaborate. And Whit gave his honest answer that like Paul Newman's pink lemonade and New Amsterdam vodka. And then people started just making it as a drink and tweeting us just as the drink before it even had a handle. And then, when they had the affiliation with New Amsterdam. So like people were kind of throwing names up, and somebody, and I don't know if they've come for their bag of coins yet, but somebody out there had said Pink Whitney and it stuck. I think it was just a listen, to be honest with you. And then that was the name of the drink. We started calling the drink that. And then behind the scenes, Barstool was talking to New Amsterdam or Gallo, whichever it, I know Gallo owns the company. And then, people got to talking and coming up with the idea of doing this pink lemonade flavored vodka with the Barstool brand and the Chiclets branding on it. And it was supposed to be temporary. It was supposed to be kind of a seasonal thing. And then the success of it was crazy. It was through the roof. It was like, and you have obviously hockey fans who like it, but like sororities who, maybe a lot of those gals aren't listening to Spittin Chiclets. It's been huge in sororities. Also, like the Black community, it's been huge. There's a ton of videos online of, people maybe they're not hockey fans or traditionally hockey fans. They find us through the brand. So they'll buy a bottle of Pink Whitney and then with Spittin Chiclets and even find us through that. So it's kind of like this brand that kind of, all 4 quadrants or how many quadrants there are of, demographics out there. It kind of crosses so many names off as far as who's going to buy it. And it's been wild. I mean, like I said, it was supposed to be, I think, a 3 or 6 month thing. And here it is 2 years in. And it's every year just seems to get more popular.
Crazy. It's been so much fun to watch it take off. How important are you guys to the NHL? Like you're talking about now, you're bringing people to hockey, you're bringing people, to your podcast through a vodka. Like the NHL right, needs to grow more. We all know that, and we'll talk about that in a second. But how important is Chiclets to the NHL? Because, man, you guys are constantly talking about the game. You're introducing the game through vodka. You're introducing the game through people that just follow Barstool. Like, hey, what's another Barstool podcast that's really successful? Oh, Spittin Chiclets. Oh, you're not a hockey fan? Well, maybe you should give it a listen, because you're going to laugh your ass off and have a great time, and you're going to learn something. It's going to be interesting. I think your impact on the NHL is massive.
Thanks. I appreciate it. As far as how important we are, I don't know how to quantify that without sounding like an egomaniac. And I really don't have, try not to have much of an ego about this stuff, but you do hear from people when we interview them, and after we interview them, they talk to us and tell us, how they get into it, or the kids listen to it. And, you do realize, you'd be a fool not to realize the impact we do have. We don't, it's funny, we don't work directly with the NHL. And I think that's probably for the better almost, because once, as I said, I'm wearing it's the old school logo. That's why I got the hat on. But, because you got to be careful who you get in bed with financially, because then, then you can't say anything. You can't talk about this guy anymore. You can't. And that's not how we do it. You know what I mean? Like, we don't sue a guys. And if we do, and we don't want to put it to public, we'll just cut it. But I like to think we're not a check and balance to the NHL. Like, I think we kind of, trying to think of two partners who don't acknowledge each other almost, but not acknowledge each other. That's the wrong word. But like, hey, just keep doing what you're doing. We'll keep doing what you're doing. It's mutually beneficial to the both of us. And not to say we would never do any business with them, but I think right now in the current state it's great. Like, you don't have anybody like you're accountable to, as far as, not being able to criticize this or that one. And we do criticize the NHL frequently. We're not shy about it. But I think they got their big boy and big girl pants on about it. They're not going to, try to shun us in any way. I think they realize that, we do have a positive impact at the end of the day on the game.
No doubt. And what is next for the game of hockey? Because the brand needs to grow, right? Like, it's fantastic, and we love it, but we're fans. Like, we have been fans since, birth almost. So what's next for the NHL? What do they need to do?
Get the younger demo. I think that's always been an issue for the NHL. I know they went out and hired the TikTok Josh Richards, who does a show at El Prez at Barstool. He's a Canadian kid who loves hockey. I think, if they get someone like Bieber on board, even I don't musically, I don't know where he is career wise, but he's still a monster name. I think they have to get the young demographics involved. Even if it's just showing clips online and just letting whoever wants to show your clips. Don't DCMA them. Let whoever wants to show. They're promoting your game for free. I think that's key. And I think also too, like, uncharted demos out there. You're talking the long-term future of the game, 20, 30 years down the line. Well, you look at how much America's changed and how much the demographics of America are going to change. And there's a huge untapped audience out there for people who, culturally don't know hockey. They can grow up with it, whether they're from another country or their ancestors are, or whether they grew up here and just never had a reason to watch. I think there are so many untapped customers out there for the NHL, so many untapped fans that they can find. And I think the key to having someone fall in love with the game is getting them into the building at least once. Then you really appreciate the sport for what it is. It's a little tougher on TV. Not to say you can't fall in love with it on TV, but getting a person in the building is a huge factor in making them a fan.
No doubt about that. Growing up, going to Flyers games as a kid was this unbelievable thing. And my dad's friend was a season ticket holder, and we would get tickets for like a Saturday afternoon game and do lunch and go to a game, and the place is rocking and the warm-ups are going on. The guys got their helmets off. Like, I'll just never forget it. It was something, that it sticks with me today. And that's why I'm a big fan of you guys. So let's talk about, let's pivot. I wanted to ask some good Barstool stories. I want to ask some of your stories. You've had some unbelievable interviews over the years. You've had so many great guests on. You've been able to talk to just so many interesting people in the game of hockey, around the game. A favorite guest that you ever had, and why?
That's a tough one. It's like asking which one of your 340 kids are your favorite. But it's funny too, because I always say, like, in the if you're talking about top movies of all time, you got to do top comedy or top drama, because the funniest interview we ever did, and that I don't know if that's the best, is Tim Stapleton.
Oh my God, so funny.
Like, we had heard great things about him before. I know Whit knew him. How funny he was. And what's funny is he's a pretty quiet kid, like off, not even off the ice, off the podcast. I'd say he's pretty low key. And he came in that room and he was like Richard Pryor on the Sunset Strip in that hotel room for an hour and a half. And then when we were falling out of our chairs laughing at the stories, and when we dropped it, I would say maybe less than 10% of 5% of our audience might have known who Tim Stapleton was. And then the next day he's, you know, a hockey DB, the most people Googling him out there for that week or whatever. So I always go to Stapes because it was so goddamn funny, and the stories and the way he told them. It was really like a comedy performance. From a personal level, though, like probably a two-way tie between Cam Neely and Adam Oates as a Bruins guy. I mean, I'm still always going to be a Bruins guy, a Bruins fan at heart. Especially Neely, though, because he's a guy like, you know, my favorite player. I know, you know, Bobby Orr, I was basically too young for Bobby Orr. You know, he left Boston in 76. I was 4 years old. So you know, you don't have, your brain's still jello at that point. You're not forming real memories. So I, you know, can't sit there and say, oh, I watched Bobby Orr play. And yeah, Bork was awesome. And, you know, I love guys like Brad Park and Jean Rattel, but Rick Middleton. But it was Cam Neely for me, man. He just, you know, he was the guy. They never said the words power forward until Cam Neely played. Like he, you know, scored 50 goals, 200 penalty minutes. Like guys could fight and score before, but not to this level, to this degree that Neely could. So I worshiped them growing up. I mean, that was the first, maybe only time I cried watching a guy retire. I mean, his retirement. It was so sad because he was so good. I mean, he scored 50 goals in 41 games on a one leg. It was like this amazing feat, and you knew how much he battled to get back. And I'm sure you've seen it being in the NFL for years, and how much guys go through just to get back on the field or on the ice, and to see him break down, it killed me. But fast forward to interviewing him, man, it was like, because he's not a media friendly guy at all. So we were lucky to get him. And it turns out it was his kid who said, hey, Dad, I want you to go on. That's actually a low key recruitment tool for us, the children of players who might be reluctant. And it was awesome. It was like the fact I was able to sit there and not only talk to him about his Bruins heyday, but ask him about Dumb and Dumber and talk to him about whatever else was awesome. And then Adam Oates, that was more of like a drama. He's funny in a dry way, but it was like having a professor of the game on. Because he sees the game, sees the game on a level that very few people do. I mean, for my money as a passer, I would prefer Oates over Gretzky as a passer. No disrespect to my boys, Ty and Trevor, Gretzky's sons, but like I think Oates was a better passer, all said and done. And so having him on, he just sees the game in such a different way, and with the wisdom he was able to pot, even a hockey dummy like me in that time span was incredible. It was a thrill talking.
The one specific reason why I like the Adam Oates interview is the fact that he could articulate it back. I think it's one thing to be able to coach it and talk to somebody else who is not a, you know, so-and-so, you know, like Biz and Wit, they can talk at a different level, and you could talk at a certain level for a fan and a media member. Like there's levels to everything. Like everyone says like, oh, you know, certain people don't know things. I think there's levels to everything. There's levels as players, there's levels as media members, and then there's levels as fans. And like, I've never heard someone talk about the game like that, period.
Yeah. And like the fact that he could see how a guy was handling a stick to clear a puck, and like, hey, wait a minute, you can fix your game just by this one simple maneuver. Like nobody else was calling Kevin Miller and telling him that. It was Adam Oates was the only guy who was seeing this thing. And it just, like I said, it's like picking children out, because even in the last year, we've had so many great interviews. Like Brent Sutter, take him for example. I mean, the guy played, for the Islanders in the 80s. He coached in the NHL for a bit, and someone reached out, hey, he wants to come on. And sometimes with older guys, actual boomers, I know everyone calls you a boomer nowadays, even if you're in your 30s because you're older than them, but actual baby boomers, sometimes you don't know what you're going to get for, if they know what we're doing story wise. You just, so I mean, with any interview there's a dice roll, and he come on and slayed. Like we were flabbergasted after how funny Brent Sutter was, the stories he told, like how honest he was. We went in with, I guess I don't know what kind of expectations we had, but he exceeded whatever they were, because he was stunningly funny, just a funny guy. But then like Shane Corson come in, blew the roof off the place. Jody Shelley, tremendous interview. Jose Theodore just did him, Canadians legend, had some stuff he wanted to square up from 15 years ago, the way the media treated him. Like we're lucky, man, that these guys come in and they kind of like leave themselves unguarded and answer stuff that we ask them. It's a blessing to do this for a living.
For our listeners that are going to be listening and hearing about RA for the first time, the best of 2021 that just came out today, episode 350, that, Sutter was the first one on there, and you can do a little bit of deep dive and you learn more about it. Probably the best of is a great way to start and kind of figure out how you guys are doing. But just your last couple of weeks, Jose Theodore was, I mean, so candid with everything.
Yeah.
I mean, how refreshing is that, right? He just let it rip. He talked about everything.
Yeah, and he's a great guy to have, a veteran who's been out of the game for a while, has made his money. He's not looking to get back into the game, so he owes nothing to anybody. It's up the truth, or whatever stories he wants to tell. And I mean, even some guys who do still work for teams, I think it's like, what are you gonna fire me for telling a story? I mean, obviously there's a line, but our guys are pretty good about respecting it. But yeah, a guy in his position, those are the ideal guests, the guys who aren't beholden to anybody. They made their dough and they just maybe want to get stuff off their chest, maybe want to come up for some laughs and or whatever. But yeah, Jose was great because like the way the Montreal media, mistreated him and misrepresented him, and he was still pretty pissed about it. You could see it in his voice, and I was sitting next to him during the interview, and you could see how he's still pissed off about it, and rightfully so. I mean, they had a picture of him for 2 years, and the cops gave it to the press from a party 2 years before that had nothing to do, but it was Hell's Angels. It was a Canadian. They had him on the front page of the paper 6 days in a row for nothing. And it was, and the goalie for the Canadians too. I can't imagine how much of a hell his life was for a few days, but he was a fun interview, and it was great, even better hanging out with him that night. He stuck around for the Canadian Stanley Cup game, and to be able to sit there with a guy who actually played goalie for the Canadians during the Stanley Cup, to pick his brain about Price, what his mental process was, that was awesome. I mean, that was as good as the interview, just being able to get his perspective during the game. It was another fringe bonus of working at Barstool Sports.
No doubt about that. Yeah. And then Danica was great. Now I see Ken all the time on NHL Network, and now I'm going to watch him more, like after hearing the story. And again, he works for NHL Network, and that was it was interesting. Kevin Weeks was awesome.
Yeah. Weeksy's such a good guy. You ever meet Weeksy?
No, I never have, but man, he is so authentic.
Yeah. Yeah. He's, we had him on, I think 4 years ago. So it was almost like having him on for the first time after that amount of time. And he's just knows so much about the game and so many different levels. Like, and it was great to talk about the media stuff because it's addicting to get stories, man. That's like, I tried to explain it to Whit and Biz years ago. Like, when you guys score a goal, that's like getting a scoop to a journalist. It's the same type of thing. So maybe because Weeksy was a goalie and he couldn't score a goal, this is where you're getting as scooping journalists. It's a chopper overhead. We're getting all the sounds today.
Are they coming after you? Are they coming after you, RA, or no?
Get the fuck out of here, good fellas. No helicopters up there. No, they better not be.
They better not be.
They can knock. I'll answer. They can knock.
I love it, man. Hey, so I wasn't even going to ask this, but it triggered my mind.
Mm-hmm.
So we talked about cancel culture earlier.
Yeah.
The Jeremy Roenick situation.
Mm-hmm.
That was crazy.
Yeah.
When he was saying that on the interview, and I'm listening, I'm like, oh, he's done. He's done. You can't say that stuff and work for NBC Sports. It is what it is. I'm a fan of JR, obviously as a Flyers fan, but as a media fan, I thought he was great on TV, and I think he's missed on TV.
Yeah, NBC certainly missed him because their broadcast was really vanilla a lot ever since he left, whether it was the nightly games. I mean, I think maybe the lame duck status was there too because they knew it was there last year. They weren't getting the contract most likely. So it was just kind of like, all right, let's roll through the punches here. But as for the way that went down, I mean, like I've said before, like we try to kind of give him an out during the story. Like it was weird because of the dynamic at play, right? You talk about a lady a woman who's on vacation with another couple. So she's that close of friends with these people to be on vacation with them. He's telling the story. Where do you police what this guy should say when he's on vacation with his a good friend of his that, again, they're that close that they're on vacation together. So it's kind of like, all right. And if you listen to the clip, I say to him, careful coworker, like, cause I'm, I don't get offended by much, Colin, but I know what's going to, set the lamps off for other people. And I say, careful coworker. And even Biz said something as well. And I think he was just so adamant that he wanted to tell that story. Like, and we could have cut it. Like we said to him, anything you want to cut. Now our alarm bells didn't really go off like you might think they would, again, because the level of friendship at play in the story, that kind of was like, you're deferring to the person telling the story who knows the person very well. So you don't think it's that they're going to do them dirty, so to speak. And we let it fly. Like that was the interview. He had no problem with it. We let it fly, and we saw what happened as a result. Now, I think it wasn't a one strike thing. It wasn't like, JR did this, he's fired. That was hardly the case. I always say during the playoffs, Colin, don't give the refs an opportunity to blow the whistle. Don't commit a penalty. And I think, JR gave NBC an opportunity to blow the penalty by doing that. But it was just, it was just 7 to the game. They were ready to throw him out for the season. And I think there was a lot of history there. And I think he was kind of like, okay, well, who F NBC? What are they going to do? And They did fire him. I think they were looking for probably an opportunity to do so, and he gave it to them. And as for Catherine, I felt awful afterwards for the position that she was put in as a result of that. Like, yeah, maybe again, it's tough to say, well, we weren't looking out for her because, well, the person who presumably would be looking out for her is the guy telling the story. And maybe, maybe she wasn't as offended by it as people perceived her to be. I don't know, Catherine. I know I felt awful that she was put in the position of either having to say nothing, which people will take as her silently condoning being talked about like that, or B, she has to make a statement about her friend who put her in the shitty spot, even if like maybe she was mad, maybe she was mad at him, but just, you know what I mean? It was such a convoluted thing. I just felt terrible that Catherine was put in that spot. And, could we have, in hindsight, taken it out? Sure. But again, when someone's telling a story about their close friends, you just kind of, defer to them. And, I think our antenna were up then, but they're probably even more so now. But, I don't think people typically tell those stories anymore anyways.
No. And to give people light of what we're talking about, Jeremy Roenick, former Flyer, worked at NBC Sports, went on vacation with his wife and a friend at NBC Sports, and just was telling funny crossing the line stories. Again, it's him and his friend, so it's not a crossing the line to him. It's his story to tell. And, it was perfect for Chiclets and good times. But these weren't stories that happened 20 years ago. They were stories that, went on now. So that's what we're referring to. And it's, it's water under the bridge at this point. I want to talk about the KHL.
Mm-hmm.
Can you paint a picture of the NHL to the KHL for those that don't know what it is? And then, I'm going to touch on a couple of stories that may trigger your mind for some good laughs.
First off, the play and players in the KHL, they're premium players. It's not a shit or bum league by any stretch. Now, having said that, it's very much a Wild West operation over there. It's probably the second best professional league in the planet, but it's bananas. I mean, Russia's a crazy backwoods country. It's run by a dictator, a tyrant, and things get favored. People get favored in ways that they don't in this country. Well, at least not yet. And it's things that just run crazy. I mean, guys getting cash, like a trash bag full of cash is their payment. People living in crazy places, whatever, crazy apartments where your landlord is coming into you and staying in your house while you're on the road and you don't know that. I mean, the endless stories about the KHL, they're out there and they're true. I think it's just the best way to put it is the KHL is just a great representative for Russia as a whole. It's a fucked up place, and the KHL is a fucked up league.
I think the funniest story for me, there's a couple good ones. The Hennessy story, where the owner signs the guy because his last name's Hennessy and he just drank Hennessy with him all night.
Yeah, exactly. That type of stuff. It's stuff that you would read about maybe in a Ted Lasso episode or like Brockmire or something. That would be a joke on TV, but the KHL it actually happens in them. Also, too, it's like if you either play yourself out of the league in the NHL, or if you say you did something bad on social media, or you had some charges that may not have stuck, but they kind of did. Maybe legally they didn't stick, but word of mouth wise they did. The KHL will gladly welcome you with open arms. They don't look at that at all. It's not a detriment. Like you're not. I don't think the Scarlet Letter. I don't think they've ever read the Scarlet Letter on Russia. Let's leave it at that.
I think another good one for me is when, I think, was it Burke, where he snuck out in the middle of the night and the owner was there at 4 a.m. I don't know if that was that, where he like hid in the closet and packed his bag. I don't know if it was Sean Burke or not.
Yeah, I'm doesn't ring a bell at the time. I think because Biz did Burke by himself, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. That's why I might not register. Yeah.
I mean, I love the KHL stories. Everyone loves the KHL stories. And then media got involved with you guys. What was that all about? Like their media comes at you guys. What was that whole?
It was more I think it was from, if I remember correctly, it was more the coach. Andre Nazaroff? He had some shit to say about it. So I think there's been a few times people barking at us, but Andre Nazaroff is one that comes to mind. Yeah, I mean, we were talking shit, or somebody was on talking shit, and I don't know, they basically threatened us if we were in Russia, they'd kick our ass, and I'm paraphrasing here, but yeah, it was one of those things we laughed at, because you're not going to find me in Russia unless you kill me and take me there.
All right, so I had a Boston friend who sent me some messages here as we wrap things up with RA of Barstool Sports and Spittin Chiclets. So his first question was the toughest Boston brew of all. This is a shout out to Mags, by the way. Mags played hockey in the area and then went to Florida, and he was a a closer for the Gators where I started, and then he bounced around the minor leagues and played for the Mets organization, and a great guy. Now he's coaching baseball in Atlanta, but hockey fan nonetheless. And when you said you were coming on, I had to reach out to him. So, toughest Boston Bruin of all time?
That's a tough one. It's a short list, but it's just basically who do you think of the three. You know what? I'll go with Neely, man. I mean, I just Terry O'Reilly and Stan Jonathan are the other two who were tough as nails. O'Reilly won a lot. He didn't win every fight. Neely, very seldom did you see him lose a fight, and something just snapped in him. Like some guys fight because that's their job. Neely just snapped. Like he just something, and you could see it in his eyes. And he was the most ferocious fighter I've ever seen in a Bruins uniform. So I'm gonna go with Cam Neely.
The best local athlete of all time.
Best local athlete. I know this is trying to tee me up for somebody, but best local athlete of all time.
I guess it could be any Boston area. And there's a lot to pick.
Keith Kachuk.
Keith
Kachuk, yeah. Originally he lived in East Boston, in the city kid. Then he moved to Medford, just outside the city. So I'm going to go Keith Kachuk.
Okay. Most exciting Brewings team to watch growing up?
The Lunch Pail AC, which was the short for Lunch Pail Athletic Club. It was when Don Cherry coached the Bruins in the late 70s into the early 80s. And unfortunately, they never won a Stanley Cup. They lost in the final, I believe, twice to the Canadians. And then, of course, the semifinals, too many men in the ice in 79, which still haunts Bruins fans. That's why every time they call that penalty to this day, Bruins fans of a certain age get twitchy because it takes them back to that era. But definitely the late 70s. That's when I fell in love with the team. That's when I, was watching every game. I'm still watch every game. But I was, with your face on your fist like this with the rabbit ears above the TV on Channel 38. That team was so good, man. Terry O'Reilly, Rick Middleton, Jean Rattel, Brad Park, Joe Gilbert, and that it was just, that's the team I fell in love with, and I will always have affection for that era. And it's just tough they never got a cup because they deserved it as much as anyone.
And then these are the blanket ones for me. It's gonna. I guess two questions: one, the greatest players of all time, and two, is Ovi going to break the record?
Go to two first. Yeah, Ovi's going to break the record, barring any crazy injury. He doesn't have to, he can play 5 more years, do 50, 50, and 320s, and I think he'll still get it. So, and he's still going at a pretty good clip. So he's definitely gonna break the record. The best players of all time. We'll give you a lineup basically.
I guess.
Yeah.
You're top. Obviously, Gretzky, Lemieux's up there. I've heard you talk a couple names over the years, a couple guys from the Bruin. Like for you, you know what? Let's scratch that because I think that's chalk. How about your favorite players to watch of all time?
Favorite to watch of all time. I'm beating his name to death. Neely's probably at the top of the list. But as far as I'll go non-Bruins, that spices up a little. You know what? Guy Lafleur, that's an ancient name from the past, but seeing him torture my Bruins in that same era, the 70s, he was dynamic goal scorer, dynamic at everything he did. He had this flowing hair, blonde hair out there. He was amazing to watch. So Guy Lafleur is definitely on that list. Guys you hated, but you'll love to watch them. Let me see. Dominic Kashuk. He's a guy whose name doesn't get mentioned enough when talking about the best goalies to ever do it. I know everyone's kind of raw. Patrick Waugh, Marty Brodeur, rightfully so. Those guys are number 1 and 2 in most of the categories. But Kashuk was on a lot of bad teams during his career. He carried that Buffalo Sabres team to the Stanley Cup final in 1999, dragged them to the playoffs a bunch of other times. Look at his numbers, the way he played. Maybe this is why I liked him, because I called he was a street hockey goalie on ice, and I mean that in the best complimentary way. He just never quit on the play. He had an unorthodox style, but it was a successful style. So Kashuk's another guy who I really love watching play.
And then 2 more for me, and we'll wrap things up. You said on the latest one of the more recent interviews. Sorry, I couldn't get out there.
Mm-hmm.
You said the Flyers would be a team you'd play for if it wasn't for the Bruins, if you can go back and play. Why the Flyers?
Because Philly's kind of like doing a badass Northeast city that, the Flyers have an unreal history. I know it's been a struggle for the last almost, about 40 years or so as far as Stanley Cup wise, but, they built such a great history and foundation with that era, with the Broad Street Bullies, that DNA kind of still lingers throughout the team history. And plus, I haven't been to Philly. It's one of those places I think its reputation precedes it, and not necessarily in a good way. I love Philly, man. Like Whit talks shit about them all the time. We have fun with them, but we get down there, most generous, loving, great people. Whether drink, food, whatever else is in session in Philly.
Karaoke.
Great call.
McGillen.
McGillen's, yeah.
McGillen's a good time.
Great time. So yeah, Philly's just a great American city with a great tradition of hockey. And yeah, if I couldn't play in Boston, that was my old school pick. I also said Tampa too, but that's.
Oh, you did say Tampa.
Yeah,
well,
I said if it was today, Tampa, but like my old school pick, Philly. But,
yeah,
Tampa. I mean, no taxes, Gulf of Mexico, can't beat it.
Can't beat it. I played in the XFL there, man. It was a fantastic time. Yeah, it was a good time. We had a lot of fun. And then lastly, on a somber note, passing you Jimmy Hayes. Very sad stuff. I finished practice and saw it, and I listened to both you guys and Missing Curfew, and found Missing Curfew through you guys. And I think it was a week where I was like, I think when you guys went to just one episode a week, I'm like, all right, let me start listening to somebody else and hear another hockey voice. And I started listening to Missing Curfew and those guys there, and O'Brien and Upshaw and Jimmy Hayes, and sad stuff, man. I know you were at the viewing, the wake. He's a Boston kid. Talk about a little bit about Jimmy and how special, that tribute was to him not too long ago.
Yeah, Jimmy, he's a sweetheart of a kid. I knew him since he was a baby, literally. Like his nanny was a very good friend of mine, still is to this day. So I saw him. I mean, I'm 18 years older than him, so obviously we didn't hang out during his formative years. But I know his parents and his family. I was aware that he became a good hockey player, and then I met him maybe when he was 10 or 12 years old, formally through his dad. And then obviously when he got pro, I'd see him around and shoot the breeze with him here and there. And then when the show, we had him on a bunch of times, a few times, however many it was, he was just a beautiful soul. Like I know, when we lose people, we tend to deify them in death a lot of times. But I think when you saw the outpouring after Jimmy, there's nothing contrived or phony about that. It was genuine love and support from so many people, because everybody he was in proximity to, like I said on my tweet, he just put you in a better mood. Like he was just such a happy person, like a goofball, just always trying to make you laugh and have fun, and had such a wonderful spirit. Like I don't know, Pat, if you saw Pat Maroon's tribute, that was absolutely beautiful. Like how Jimmy's just mere presence, kind of reminded Pat the game's supposed to be fun, and Pat absorbed what Jimmy taught him, whether on purpose or not, and kind of changed his career and likely extended it into what it's been now. And that was probably the best example of what Jimmy means to people. Is he was just a genuinely good person, loving person, and to lose him at such a young age, it's just an awful tragedy for his family, his beautiful wife and beautiful kids he's left behind. It's heartbreaking, and it's a reminder that how unfair and cruel life can be the older you get.
Yes, it is, man. It's true. Only the good die young. It's sad stuff, and he won't be forgotten. That's for sure.
No, not at all.
Well, dude, I really appreciate you coming on. It was just fantastic.
My pleasure. Absolutely, my pleasure.
Somebody in the world that I'm in, I admire, look up to, and consider myself peers with, and look forward to having a beer with. Man, I get to Boston and getting to know you a little bit better. But Brian McGonigal, RA, Rear Admiral, appreciate you coming on, man.
My pleasure, man. Hopefully, who knows? Maybe I'll catch a Cats game this year. We'll hook up after. You never know. We're always traveling. Maybe our schedules will line up.
I would love it, man. Appreciate you.
Likewise.